Before the sun had even risen above the sea, Lamacera village had begun to wake up with the creaking of wood and the wind blowing through the dry thatched roofs. On the sandy beach still damp with dew, silhouettes of people trudged by, carrying long spears on their shoulders, the shiny iron blades reflecting the flickering light of oil lamps, the salty smell of the sea mixed with the smell of charcoal smoke from the early fires. Where women were cooking sticky rice and boiling dried fish eggs for their husbands and children to go out to sea. Here, shark hunting is not just a job, but a lifeline between people and the sea, between poverty and the old pride left by their ancestors. Lamacera, a small village located in the East Nusa Tenggara region, Indonesia, is known as the last capital of sea hunters. Here, people have nothing but the sea. The land is arid, just rocks and sand, trees grow sparsely, the dry season lasts until the soles of the feet crack, and the rainy season washes everything away into the sea. Children grow up with the sound of the waves, while men are born to rowboats and hunt. Sharks, to them, are both devils and gifts from heaven. I remember that morning, when I followed the group of fishermen out to sea. The sun was still hidden behind streaks of dark purple clouds. The long, old wooden boats, repainted with peeling green paint, heavily cut through the waves. Each boat had 3 or 4 men, holding oars, their shoulders wrapped in hemp rope. Their eyes as deep as black water. The oldest in the group was Mr. Daeng Sero, over 60, sunburned, his back hunched, but his voice still resounded like the sound of a sea drum. He said that but sometimes, they were lured closer by their own curiosity. When the first shark appeared, I almost held my breath. A giant black streak slithered through the blue water, its triangular fin sticking out like a knife blade. The young man held the spear tightly, waiting until the fish's body floated up before launching it. The whistling sound of the spear tore through the air, followed by the sound of water splashing white. The shark thrashed violently, its tail shaking the boat. Blood spread dark red in a corner of the sea. The whole group jumped into the fight as if in an ancient ritual. They shouted, pulled the rope, and stabbed repeatedly until the giant was barely alive. There were no guns, no machines. Everything was bare-handed and courageous. When they pulled the fish onto the boat, I could clearly see its enormous size, nearly 4 meters long, weighing more than 300 kilograms. Its deep black eyes reflected the rising sun. Both terrifying and tragic. People say sharks are the ultimate predators. But here, they are the prey of the poorest people. After killing the fish, they did not cheer as if they had won a battle. There were only a few silent nods, because everyone understood that it was not a feat, but a part of their livelihood. This shark, they would bring back to the village, cut off the fins and dry them, the most valuable thing, which could be sold to traders from Surabaya or even as far as China. Each kilo of dried shark fins cost a month's wages. The meat was dried to make fish sauce. The skin was sold to tanneries. The liver was cooked to make oil. Not a single part was wasted, because each part could be exchanged for rice, salt, and sometimes medicine for the children. On the way back, The boat was heavy, but everyone was silent. There was only the sound of wind and waves. Mr. Deng smoked a hand-rolled cigarette, the acrid smoke rising to his nose, then said softly, "The sea gives us life, but it also demands repayment." He pointed far away, where the water was dark, perhaps a streak of blood. "Every day the sharks are gone. Our village is gone." I remember the look in his eyes when he said that, not resentment. Not fear, but a kind of weary acceptance. In a land where poverty eats away at every meal, people have no choice between right and wrong. They only choose between life and death. Marine conservation organizations have come here with cameras and calls for conservation. But they leave with nothing but leaflets and a few pitying looks. But the people still have to eat, still have to live, still have to row boats out to sea, hunting sharks like their ancestors did. At night, the village was lit up by torches. On the sand, men were cutting shark meat, blood running red on their feet. Children were running around, laughing and playing, fearless. Women were collecting shark fins, washing them with salt water, and arranging them on drying racks. The strong fishy smell filled the air, mixed with the smell of kitchen smoke and sweat. The whole village seemed to be immersed in a wild and terrifying sea music. I sat outside the hut, looking out at the sand where the giant shark lay motionless. The moonlight poured down, reflecting on its skin in patches of cold silver. A child, about 10 years old, came and sat next to me, asking, "Are you afraid of sharks?" I smiled, "Yes, but I think it's beautiful." He nodded, his eyes looking far away. My father said, "When a shark..." The next morning, with the mist still covering the thatched roofs, the sound of wooden drums echoed from the sandbank. Today was not shark hunting day, but Buru Baal, whaling day. For the Lamacera people, whaling was the most sacred ritual, a promise to the sea. Only a few times a year, when the wind changed direction and the whales migrated across the deep southern waters. The whole village prepared together as if for battle. No one set sail alone. The whole community was bound by a common breath, to live or die together. From afar, I saw dozens of long boats, called peladang, lined up on the sandbank. They were made from the trunks of star trees, joined together with rattan and beeswax, without a single iron nail. Each boat held up to 10 men, with the Lama Fa, the spear-bearer, chosen by the family, passed down from generation to generation. These were no ordinary fishermen. They were warriors of the sea, believing that whales were a gift from heaven, and that only those with courage and respect were allowed to hunt them. Before setting out, the Lama Fa knelt, touched their foreheads to the tip of their spears, and chanted prayers in an ancient language. They prayed for favorable winds, calm waves, and the gentle release of the whale's soul. Then a shout rose, as loud as a heartbeat. The whole beach moved. Boats were pushed into the water, sliding on the round logs. The shouts of the people pulling them mixed with the sound of the waves, resounding like a song from the primitive times. About an hour out, the sun was high, the sea sparkled like a giant mirror. The wind carried the salty and strong smell of the sun. People strained their eyes to look towards the horizon, where sometimes there were columns of water spraying up, a sign of whales. "Bail!" A shout rang out from a boat ahead, pointing to a dark spot in the distance. The entire fleet immediately changed direction, the oars stirring the water vigorously, creating small waves that followed one after another. I had never witnessed such a beautiful and fierce scene. The sea surface rose, dozens of boats darting forward like arrows. A giant whale, perhaps more than 10 meters long, surfaced to breathe, spraying a white column of water. Its back was shiny like steel, reflecting the sunlight. Lamacera stood up straight, his hands tightly gripping the spear handle, his muscles bulging, his eyes fixed on the target. When the distance was only a few meters, he shouted loudly, throwing the spear through the whale's thick skin. The sound of steel hitting flesh, the sound of boiling water. Then a deep, painful roar echoed across the sea. The whale thrashed violently, whipping its tail, causing the water to spray white. The entire boat shook violently. The person holding the rope to tie the spear was thrown into the water, but his teammates immediately pulled him back. No one gave up. Blood dyed the entire water red. The giant animal struggled to escape, diving down and then coming up, dragging the boat along like a toy. Another person threw another spear, then another, one spear after another, until the giant fish was exhausted. Its breathing became shallow, and it lay still in the red water. No one cheered. There was only silence. The death of a whale, even a victory, was still filled with grief. People believed that the whale's spirit would return, bringing rain and fish to the village. So, when the whale's body was pulled to shore, they did not cut it open immediately. They stood in a circle, singing an old song, apologizing to the ocean. I heard that song, sad and beautiful to the point of choking. It echoed across the water, blending with the sound of the waves like a prayer for the giant animal that had just fallen. In the afternoon, the village was filled with the smell of blood and salt again. Men were chopping pieces of whale meat, bare-handed, their shirts stained red. The meat was divided equally among each family according to the old custom. The Lamacera's family got the head. The poorer family got the tail. Everyone got a share, because everyone contributed to the sea. There were no traders here. No money changed hands. There was only sharing. Whale meat was hung on ropes to dry. The smoke from the kitchen filled the village. Children laughed and played whale riding, while the elders sat telling stories of their ancestors who hunted whales with their bare hands and praying. Under the blazing sun, the sunfish lay still on the sand, its body flat like a giant plank. The villagers gathered around, one hand holding a knife, the other holding a basin of salt water. There was no ceremonial tray, only the heat, the strong fishy smell and the steady breathing of those accustomed to dissecting the gifts of the sea. They started from the head, where the skin was thickest. The knife did not cut but pried, each stroke slowly cutting through the rough skin as hard as tree bark. The blade glistened in the sun, tilted slightly at an angle so as not to cut into the white flesh underneath. Each cut made a small hissing sound, like the sound of sand being dragged. The oldest man sat down, using the tip of the knife to separate the skin from the fat. He told him not to rush, because if he cut crookedly, the skin would tear and could not be dried. After drying, the sunfish skin could be used to make bags, to make rain covers for boats. Two young men held the two sides tightly, stretching the skin like fabric. Then the third person inserted a knife in the middle, separating each centimeter. Sweat ran down, mixed with seawater, dripping onto the fish. They worked in silence, only the sound of knives and the distant sound of waves. When the first layer of skin was peeled off, the smell of fat overflowed, hot like the smell of old oil. Underneath was a thick layer of meat, soft and moist, white as candle wax. They began to cut along the grain, in long strips the length of an arm. The knife went diagonally from the head to the belly, carefully avoiding the liver, which they kept for themselves. A woman came forward, holding a bamboo basket, catching each piece of meat that was cut out. She quickly washed it in salt water, then brought it back to the drying rack. Under the sun, the meat would shrink, turn a slightly ivory color, and smell salty. The villagers said that was when the fish had slept peacefully in the sun. The belly of the sunfish was softer and oilier, so they used small, curved knives to cut the fat away from the meat. The fat was collected in a basin, dried separately, or melted to extract the oil. The oil was used to light lamps, sometimes mixed with rice on days when food was scarce. The fish liver was placed separately in a basket, wrapped in banana leaves. The liver was large, shiny, heavy, and contained a thick, pale yellow oil. The villagers said that if they cooked just one pot of fish liver, the whole family could eat for a week. But some people also said, if you eat a lot, you will dream of the sea, and hear the fish calling your name in the middle of the night. When the meat was almost all cut, they turned the fish over. It took 6 men, each holding a corner of the rope, counting loudly and pulling hard. The hundreds of kilos of fish slid across the sand, revealing its thick, flat back. In Tromsø harbor, the Atlantic wind blew fiercely, carrying with it a strong saltiness that the coastal people joked could salt even memories. The winter dawn was only a few hours away, but the men here had been awake since midnight, cups of strong black coffee in hand, eyes on the horizon where the Hilda was preparing to leave. They were fishermen who specialized in catching cod, the fish that had nourished the whole of northern Europe for centuries. On deck, dozens of kilometers of fishing line were coiled like steel snakes, awaiting orders. Each main line had thousands of small hooks, baited with fresh herring, something the cod could not resist. The cod is very clever, said the old sailor Arne, his voice hoarse from the cold wind and cigarettes. It feels the vibrations of the water. If the bait smells a little, it will leave immediately. The ship left port just as the clock struck 3 in the morning. The yellow light cast on the black water reflected the seagulls circling overhead. Each member of the crew had a role, one to cast the line, one to balance, one to prepare the bait, one to monitor the echoes from the fish finder. No one spoke much, only the dull hum of the engine and the steady pounding of the waves against the side of the ship. Like the giant heartbeat of the sea, they headed for the Barents Sea, where cod were migrating from the northern ice fields to warmer waters. Here, longlines were a more reliable tool than trawls, because they were selective, did not damage the seabed, and kept the fish fresh and undamaged. A long line could stretch up to 40 kilometers, with thousands of hooks attached every few meters. The work seemed simple, but in fact it was an art of patience and technique. When the ship reached the predetermined coordinates, the wind had increased, the waves began to rise. The captain gave the signal, and the lines began to be lowered, slow, steady, and precise. They let each section of line drop like the lifeblood of the ship into the ocean. The bait herrings glinted silver in the light, then disappeared into the thick black water. The waiting began. They did not fish with haste. For European fishermen, especially those in Scandinavia, longline fishing was a harmony between man and sea, not a battle, but a dialogue. They read the sea like an ancient book, what the waves said, what the wind signaled, what the fish moved to. Every little sound had meaning. In the control room, the blue light from the sonar screen shone on the sunburned face of Hans, the captain. He had been at sea for more than 30 years, and could probably tell the depth of the fish by looking at the screen for a few seconds. He said softly, almost mumbling, "It's there, about 80 meters." And just as he had sensed, a few hours later, the first line vibrated. No one cheered, only eyes flashed in the night. They began to pull the line, meter by meter. The line was taut as a bowstring, and each time a cod caught, the pull increased suddenly, causing the operator's hands to tremble slightly. Each fish was pulled up heavy, its body covered in a silvery blue sheen, its round, black eyes still sparkling with seawater. Hundreds, then thousands were pulled up. The work was not easy, cold, damp, and monotonous, but amid the harshness there was a strange beauty, the beauty of pure labor, of sweat mixed with sea salt. They worked in unspoken rhythm, as if they could all hear the call of the cod below. In the fish hold, the cold air spread like a mist. The fish were arranged neatly, row by row, their heads facing the same direction. Not just for beauty, laughs on, but so that when they load the boxes for export to England or Spain, people will see that the fish comes from Northern European fishermen, who fish with respect. On deck, the sky begins to lighten. The sun shines from the east, a faint golden light filtering through the grey clouds. The men are drenched in sweat and seawater, but no one complains. They wipe their hands on their thick clothes, light cigarettes, and look out to sea where the white waves still roll. The cod saved the nation, Hans says slowly, and now, it still keeps us at sea. They reel in the lines, check each hook, remove each remaining piece of bait. When the last line is pulled up, the ship turns towards port. The engine roars, mingles with the shrill cries of seagulls. The sea is now calm, as if it has given away its gift, the white gold of the ocean. In the distance, the rocky shores of Norway appear in the morning mist. Tromsø harbor is waking up. The smell of smoke from the fish factory, the sound of ship whistles, the shouts of men carrying cargo containers, all combine to create a salty symphony of Nordic sea life. When the ship docks, there is no cheering, no desire for fame, just a look of satisfaction, a tight shake of calloused hands, and a simple promise: tomorrow, we'll set sail again. In the Hilda's hold, Arne and two friends were tying bait to the lines. The whole hold was lit by a yellow light. They worked quickly and skillfully, their calloused hands moving as if they had a memory of their own. Each hook was attached to a piece of herring, cut just right, not too small, not too big, so the cod would bite into it without suspicion. Each piece of bait was also rubbed in seawater to remove the smell of human hands. Every little detail like that could decide the whole trip. The cod is not stupid, Arne said, his hands still working. It lives in cold water, is rarely hunted, so it is cautious. The bait must be fresh, the line must be clean, and the current must be understood as well as the temperament of your wife. The whole hold burst into laughter. The laughter echoed between the waves offshore, sounding both warm and strange, like a breath of life in a place that seemed to be all ice and water. Before dropping the line, Captain Hans checked the wind direction and current on radar. On the screen, the blue lines moved continuously. It is the image of the undertow. The music that the captain must memorize. He adjusts the coordinates to ensure that the line does not drift off course. Because just a few degrees off course, the whole catch can drift into the reef or cold current where the cod avoids. When the line is cast, everyone is silent. They have done this 1,000 times. But each time is as thrilling as the first. The line slides off the reel, sliding through their hands at a steady pace. Each hook sinks, like notes falling into the endless music of the ocean. Casting long lines is a time-consuming task. A coil can be up to 40 kilometers long, taking several hours to cast. Each section is marked by buoys, round orange or yellow buoys, bobbing on the surface of the water, like a string of prayer beads sent by the fishermen to the ocean floor. While waiting, they do not sleep. No one could sleep knowing that down there, at a depth of nearly 100 meters, thousands of hooks were shaking, provoking giant cod. Every time the waves crashed, the whole ship seemed to tilt to the rhythm of the sea. Sometimes the water surface was eerily calm, sometimes the wind howled like a wild beast. The work of pulling the line began when it was still dark. The first person held the crank. The second person checked each hook. The third person removed the fish. The fourth person put the fish in the box. Everything worked like a perfect machine. Without needing orders, the fish were pulled up continuously, their tails splashing white, their bodies shining silver blue, their mouths still tightly closed with hooks. Some were so big that they had to be pulled with iron hooks. When the fish's body hit the deck, a loud thump sounded like a drum beating on the chest. The largest cod could weigh more than 20 kilos. Their bodies nearly 1.5 meters long. They were considered precious fish, sought after by restaurants in England, France and Spain. Hans only smiled when he heard the price. We only know how to fish. Prices are a matter of land. But if a cod can pay for my son's education, that's enough. In the cold hold, the crates of fish were covered in ice. The youngest crew member, Eric, only 22, used a sharp knife to cut open the fish's bellies, remove the organs and wash them with cold seawater. Everything had to be done quickly, so the fish wouldn't change color. The fish were frozen in the hold, keeping them as fresh as when they were alive. No one eats frozen fish here, Eric said, but they live on it. When a big wave hit the side of the ship, water rushed onto the deck, freezing them to the bone. But no one stopped. They worked until the last hook was pulled up, until their hands were numb and their shoulders ached. In the wind, they were like silent shadows, only the sound of the engine and the breath mingled together. After each catch, they sat by the bait box, smoking, looking into the distance. The whole space was filled with the smell of fish, salt, and engine oil. To newcomers, that smell could be unpleasant, but to them, it was the smell of life. The smell of freedom, of sweat exchanged for food, of a small man facing the vast ocean. When the sun rose higher, the waves became calmer. Hands turned the boat back to shore. The boat was heavy with cargo, but everyone was relieved. On the way back, they listened to the radio, a woman's voice reading the news from Oslo. Mixed with Norwegian folk music, Eric slept on the floor, still clutching the fish knife. Arne quietly fixed the bait for the next trip. As for Hans, he stood in the cabin, looking at the horizon, where the sea and sky merged. "My life only knows how to look forward to that," he whispered. Once at port, the cod barrels are taken straight to the factory, where they are sorted by size, checked for freshness, and then put into the processing line. Some of the fish are filleted and frozen for export. Others are salted and dried, a tradition that dates back hundreds of years. When Vikings used dried cod as a food reserve on their ships, the fishermen take their share. They are not rich, but they are proud. "No one knows the sea like we do," Arne said, lifting a beer in the small portside bar. "The sea gives us, and it takes from us. But when we listen to it, it does not betray us." Night falls, and Tromsø harbor lights up in a golden light. Music flows from the bar, mingling with the sound of the waves. The fishermen prepare for tomorrow, again with bait, again with line, again with the sea. They don't need a reason. For them, the sea is more than just a job. It is their destiny. The wind howled. The storm hadn't arrived yet, but its breath was already audible. Waves lashed against the side of the ship like whips. The men wore thick life jackets and hoods, and tied their safety ropes tightly to the masts. The deck was slippery as ice, and one misstep would send them tumbling into the sea. The temperature was only a few degrees below zero there. Falling would mean death. No one said it aloud, but everyone understood. They began to pull the rope. The rope was wet and cold, hard as steel. Each pull was a battle. Below, the cod was still hooked, struggling in the swirling current. The cameraman had to keep a steady speed. The fish remover had to be quick, if he was slow. The rope would get tangled and the whole batch would break. The waves rose. The ship tilted every time a wave passed. The seawater poured onto the deck like a waterfall, cold as 1,000 needles piercing the skin. Arn laughed dryly, speaking through the wind. This is the real sea. Hans just tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The storm came faster than they expected. In a few minutes, the sky darkened. The wind howled like a demon, waves higher than the roof of the ship, pounding against the hull like ocean punches. The Hilda roared, then sank back into the deep wave pit. Metal screeched. The cables strained as if about to snap.